The Republican nominee for the 2025 mayoral election, Curtis Sliwa, returns once more to the stage of New York politics, a city he has patrolled, critiqued and defended for more than 4 decades. At 71, the founder of the Guardian Angels and longtime radio host stands again before cameras, this time not as an outsider or activist, but as a candidate challenging 2 heavyweights in an overwhelmingly democratic city. Outside the LaGuardia Performing Arts Centre in Queens, Sliwa speaks to reporters before a televised debate. The setting is familiar, a modest podium, the red beret, and an audience of journalists and local residents. He begins with characteristic bluntness.
And if somehow Zohran Mamdani is elected by the people, boy, he is going to regret ever knowing the name of Curtis Sliwa, because I'm going to be on his case 24 hours a day when he's being Pinocchio.
The crowd reacts as Sliwa continues, accusing the Democratic frontrunner of dishonesty.
Because I got to tell you, oftentimes Zohran Mamdani is Pinocchio. It's not like his nose grows. His smile just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how you know that Zohran Mamdani is telling another lie, another whopper, fantasy rather than reality.
Thank you,
It is a performance typical of Sliwa, fiery, personal and unscripted, but one that reflects his uphill battle. As the Republican nominee in a city that has not elected a Republican mayor since 2001, he faces near impossible odds. Still, political observers say Sliwa could influence the balance between Mamdani, the Democratic Party's nominee, and Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, running as an independent after losing his party's primary. Born and raised in Brooklyn, Sliwa built his reputation in the late 1970s, when New York faced waves of crime and urban decline. In 1979, he founded the Guardian Angels, a volunteer patrol group that became synonymous with civilian safety efforts in the city's subways. Wearing their distinctive red berets and white shirts, the group became a symbol of grassroots law and order activism. For decades, Sliwa cultivated the image of a streetwise reformer who took on both criminals and politicians alike. His radio career later amplified that identity, often critical, sometimes theatrical, but unmistakably New York. Now, in 2025, the themes remain consistent: public safety, homelessness, and bureaucratic reform. His campaign slogan centres on reducing the cost of living, cleaning up the city's streets, and, as he puts it, restoring common sense to City Hall. In the weeks leading to October, Sliwa has appeared across the 5 boroughs, focusing heavily on Queens and Staten Island, where Republican and independent voters remain most concentrated. He has also been an outspoken critic of both major opponents. Against Mamdani, he cast doubt on the Democrats' promises of economic equity and police reform. Against Cuomo, he draws attention to the former governor's scandals and record in Albany. Yet Sliwa's own stance diverges sharply from national Republican orthodoxy. He has refused to align himself with President Donald Trump and, at several points, has publicly opposed aspects of the White House's immigration crackdown. In his view, the city's immigrant workforce and its economic vitality are inseparable. During a campaign stop outside the Bloomberg building complex in early October, Sliwa once again faced a cluster of microphones and cameras. The setting was corporate Manhattan, yet his message was directed at everyday New Yorkers struggling with inflation and red tape. He said the city's bureaucracy, from small business licensing to housing permits, had become a nightmare of forms and fees. He pledged to dismantle what he calls layers of paper that bury the people trying to make an honest living. Over several appearances that day, Sliwa repeated his central message: affordability, safety and compassion for the homeless. He described the surge in street encampments as a moral failure and criticised what he terms political showmanship in City Hall's current housing policy. In private polls, Sliwa's numbers remain in the single digits, but his approval among working-class voters and small business owners has grown slightly. Political analysts suggest that his focus on issues like animal welfare and homeless outreach, causes rarely highlighted in Republican campaigns, has helped him retain visibility even in a crowded media cycle. Footage from his campaign trail shows Sliwa walking between television crews, answering phone calls and pausing for photographs with residents. Despite his age, his pace is brisk, his tone deliberate. Observers describe his campaign as part grassroots movement, part personal crusade, a continuation of the activism that began more than 40 years ago in the subway cars of a different New York. At each stop, he uses humour to soften his attacks. When asked about the possibility of a Democratic landslide, he smiles and replies that his role is not to win friends, but to hold them accountable. That accountability, he says, extends to all parties. He has criticised federal officials for what he calls a detachment from urban reality, policies that neglect the everyday cost of city life while focusing on partisan rhetoric. In Queens, during a campaign event in early September, Sliwa is seen walking towards supporters outside a public school. He stops to speak with teachers and parents about youth safety and after-school funding. He tells the crowd that crime prevention begins with community presence, not just police budgets. He emphasises that his guardian angels once served without government funding, relying only on volunteers and discipline. He uses that legacy to argue that civic engagement remains the city's strongest tool against violence and neglect. Throughout his public appearances, Sliwa maintains a careful balance, assertive yet measured in his language. When discussing immigration, he acknowledges security concerns, but insists on respect for those who built this city brick by brick. When addressing business regulations, he advocates streamlining without compromising labour rights. And when speaking about homelessness, he frames the issue as a shared responsibility, one requiring cooperation between city departments and non-profit organisations. The Republican nominee has also positioned himself as a champion of animal rights, a rare priority in municipal politics. His campaign platform includes expanding funding for animal shelters, enforcing stricter penalties for abuse, and introducing a citywide adoption initiative. The proposal stems from his own history as a cat rescuer, a personal story that has earned him attention from local advocacy groups and pet owners across the boroughs. For many voters, Sliwa embodies a different kind of Republican, one rooted in urban experience rather than national ideology. While his policy positions may not translate into electoral success, they add a distinct voice to the 2025 campaign, a voice that links law and order with social awareness. The contrast between Sliwa and his opponents could not be starker. Zohran Mamdani has campaigned on progressive reforms and tax redistribution, seeking to expand social housing and increase corporate accountability. Andrew Cuomo has leaned on his executive record and promises of competent management to regain public trust after his fall from the governorship. Sliwa, meanwhile, presents himself as a watchdog for the city's residents, not against party machines alone, but against what he calls the decay of leadership itself. Over recent months, he has held dozens of small gatherings rather than large rallies, meeting groups of business owners, taxi drivers and retirees to hear their concerns firsthand. He often reminds them that he still rides the subway without security and walks the same streets he patrolled as a young volunteer. His campaign team argues that this authenticity sets him apart in a political season dominated by televised debates and party fundraising. Media coverage of his campaign has been sporadic but consistent with his reputation for colourful remarks. Local editors describe him as a fixture of New York's political landscape, someone who may never win City Hall but never leaves its conversation either. His relationship with the press is often combative yet symbiotic. His sound bites draw headlines and his presence ensures coverage in a race otherwise dominated by Democratic rivals. Beyond the debate stage, Sliwa has used social media to reach younger voters, posting short videos criticising what he calls bureaucratic madness in city governance. His posts frequently show him on the streets, talking to residents about rent, public safety and trash collection. The approach aims to contrast his hands-on persona with what he describes as office-bound politicians writing policies from behind a desk. Still, analysts say his influence in the 2025 race lies less in votes and more in momentum. In a tight contest between Mamdani and Cuomo, Sliwa's share of support, even a few percentage points, could affect turnout in key districts. For Republicans nationally, his campaign offers a case study in urban persistence, a rare Republican voice competing on Democratic terrain. On the streets of Queens and the Bronx, the reception is mixed but curious. Some residents remember Sliwa's early years fighting crime and see him as part of the city's heritage. Others view his style as outdated, a relic of a rougher New York. Either way, his name remains synonymous with civic visibility and unfiltered speech. Inside his campaign headquarters, a small team handles daily press briefings, donations and volunteer coordination. They acknowledge the long odds, but say their goal is to shape the policy debate rather than secure a win. Sliwa himself has said that his measure of success will be whether anyone at City Hall starts listening to people again. His supporters argue that he has already achieved that by forcing conversations on safety, homelessness and public trust into the front pages. As election day approaches, the Republican nominee continues his tour of neighbourhoods that rarely see high-profile visits. He speaks outside small businesses, markets and train stations, often without a prepared script. His closing message to voters remains consistent, that he will watch every move made by whoever wins and hold them accountable for every promise. That message, neither partisan nor defeatist, has become his final appeal to a city he has spent his life trying to protect. As New York prepares for another election night, Curtis Sliwa stands as a reminder of a certain strain of local politics, driven by grit, visibility and a belief in direct action. He may not change the city's partisan map, but his campaign adds texture to its political story. From the subway platforms of the 1970s to the debate stages of 2025, Sliwa remains what he has always been, a watchdog with a microphone determined to speak for the streets he calls home. Curtis Sliwa, Republican nominee for the 2025 New York City mayoral election, continuing to campaign on issues of safety, affordability and accountability in a city where his presence remains as visible as his red beret.